Well, it's quite an extraordinary story you have to tell, Tony, and you've got a very patient wife here, I know, Lalel, who we'll be hearing from in just a minute. But what I'd like to know before we see some film of your rescue is what the conditions in the sea were like just prior to capsizing.
It was basically a raging storm, you know, it was blowing maximum hurricane strength winds, 70, 80 knot winds, which is tremendous, mountainous seas. It was all really, really rough, you know, it was really bad conditions.
And we should also say that this round-the-world yacht race is some 25,000 miles, isn't it?
It is, in excess of that.
Huge undertaking.
It is. It's, you start from Europe, you go down out of the Bay of Biscay from Sable d'Olonne into the North Atlantic and across the doldrums, the equator, into the South Atlantic and down into the Southern Ocean, and then you go round Antarctica, you pop round Cape Horn and back into the South Atlantic, back to the finishing line. It's a long way. I think it's about 27,000 miles, actually.
The fact that, I mean, you've been, what, 5 days trapped in the boat?
It was. Everyone sort of talks about 4 days, but in fact, from when I capsized to when I put the EPIRB, that's my distress beacon, up to the surface, and to when I was actually rescued by the Royal Australian Navy, was more or less 5 days, that's right.
So you couldn't resist giving them then a bit of a peck on the cheek in relief?
Oh, even with the big beard, it didn't make any difference. A little peck on the cheek was called for.
Now, I mean, it's impossible for any of us to understand how you felt, but can you describe just when, you know, having been trapped there for 5 days, how you realised and when you realised that you were going to be rescued?
Well, I was actually laying down on a shelf at the time. There was a very low shelf on XI Challenger, my racing yacht, but with the boat upside down, capsized, the shelf was quite high. Very difficult, but I would struggle to get on there. And although the boat's rolling and pitching and you know, all the sea is rolling around inside, it was like a bit like a washing machine. I was sitting there, you know, a little peaceful, contemplating what the next move was, when all of a sudden I heard this chuk, 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 which sounded like the prop of a helicopter, but in fact it was the engine on a rigid-hulled inflatable boat that had been launched from the Adelaide, the big ship that had come over. The next thing I heard bangs, big, enormous bangs on the side of my boat. I was up like a rocket, you know, ear hard against the hull, and eventually I heard some sort of muffled shouting in English outside, and I said, "Go for it. This is your rescue, you know, and don't blow it. Get out there now." I was a little concerned that they might just go away thinking there was no one inside.
Because that really, your chances then of survival would have been zilch.
Zilch. Finished, you know, because if people had gone down there and sort of investigated my vessel and thought there was no one there, I don't think that could have happened, though, because the Australian Navy had made up their minds to get inside. I mean, they had cut in equipment of different types, divers, and they were going to definitely get inside to see whether I was in there, whether I was alive or dead.
And of course, they'd had to sail from Australia, hadn't they? That's why it took so long, actually, to get to your rescue.
It was more or less 1,500 miles. It took them about 3 very, you know, ferocious days sailing to get down there. They were sailing through some pretty bad seas themselves.
Well, no doubt you have seen the rescue and you've seen the reconstruction many times. But
that's right.
Does it still give you the a weird feeling when you watch it?
It does. In fact, when I was on the set making it, you know, in between when the cameraman and director and everyone got off the boat, you know, coffee breaks, that kind of thing, and I was sitting down below on my own. They said, "You coming with us for a coffee?" I said, "No, pass me one down." And apart from having the cup of coffee in my hand, sitting there on my own, even in the upturned set, you know, which was all constructed especially for the film, it was very sort of airy, you know, a bit ghostly, you know, it was really quite unusual.
Now, the very important lady to your right-hand side, Lalel, I mean, we've been hearing the story, Lalel, but obviously you're back in Bristol. So how did you hear the news that Tony was in trouble?
And the television. My niece phoned up and said that she thinks something is wrong with Uncle. Will I put the television on? So I did. And there was a boat upside down. I knew then.
So your emotions obviously must have been very strong at that stage. So those 4 or 5 days must have been the longest of your whole life.
Yes, it was. It's awful.
How did you cope with that?
Well, I had friends around and they cheer me up and, you know, we talk, and kept me going.
Deep down, did you rate his chances of survival as you watched the coverage?
Yes, I knew he was alive and I knew he was in the boat.
How did you know that?
Because my stomach told me that he was alive. My head had gone, but my stomach was okay. So I knew.
Because obviously you know you're the type that Tony is, this
Yes.
great will to survive.
And he's stubborn. He's a very stubborn man.
Actually, do you think then that stubbornness, do you think that stubbornness sort of helped your will to survive when you were on the ocean there for nearly 5 days?
I think it did. You know, I mean, I've been at sea for around 30 years. Had other sort of incidences. I've sailed in most of the oceans around the world. I've had some training. You know, I understand survival and rescue. I understand that.
Were you conscious the whole time, or were you slipping in and out of consciousness?
No. I never once slipped into any dreary unconsciousness. You know, I catnapped a lot. You know, I didn't take deep sleeps, and the colder I was getting, you see, dehydration was getting me. You know, hypothermia, frostbite. My feet were getting bad, and my hands. I had one of my fingers chopped off, and things like that. It was.